Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Joe Confina. I'm an executive editor of The Guardian. I also chair a website called Guardian Sustainable Business, which is supporting business to become more sustainable. So if you don't know about it, you should, and I will leave it up to you to discover it, because there's great stuff on it. Before I introduce Dov, there are a few things I need to just mention. So please put your mobiles to silent. The event's being recorded, and there'll be an edited version coming up in the next few days, and it's also being live broadcast. So everyone out there in the ether, you're very, very welcome too. And if you would like to tweet, there's a hashtag which is RSA Behaviour. And now we're going to get underway. So I'd like to introduce Dov. And the thing I like about Americans is they're very gushing. So Fortune magazine referred to Dov as the hottest advisor on the corporate virtue circuit. And being English, I'd say he's a really interesting bloke. And you should listen to what he's got to say. And interestingly enough, by coincidence or synchronicity, however you want to describe it, I interviewed Dov when I was in New York over the summer. And one of the things we were talking about was, so Dov comes from a philosophy background, and we were talking about sort of philosophy and spirituality and the deep flows of life. And my piece appeared on the interview with Dov on the Guardian website. And the very next morning, I got a call from the RSA saying, there's this guy called Dov Seidman, it's really brilliant, and he's going to be at the RSA. Would you like to interview him on stage? And I said, well, actually, my piece just went live on the website. They said, no, it can't have been. And so I love synchronicity, because they're always how life becomes more exciting. A couple of things. Dov is the reason I was interested in interviewing Dov, because I found him one of the most articulate people about looking at what's gone wrong with capitalism and what we need to put it right. And there are a lot of people who are able to articulate the problems we're facing as we're heading towards sort of a unsustainable future. And Dov is one of the few people I've met who's able to articulate some of the answers and to paint a vision of a world where actually doing well and doing good actually go together and aren't seen anymore in competition with each other. And a couple of things about Dov. One of the things is that he's very generous. So he's the CEO of LRN, which is a company that actually is there to help businesses to understand how to be principled and to do well. So he actually walks his talk. He's not someone who just spouts the language, but he actually does it in his day-to-day life. And also he's very generous. So everyone here is going to get a free copy of his book, which is called How We Do Anything Means Everything. And unfortunately to the readers who are watching in the ether, tough luck, because you don't get one. So I'm sorry about that. And Dov, it's a great pleasure to have you here. And I'm going to disappear down onto the front seat, so you're very welcome. And let's hear what you've got to say. And when Dov is finished, he's going to talk for about 25 minutes. I'm going to then try and throw him a couple of curved balls to see what he really knows and what he doesn't. And then we're going to open it up to the audience. You can throw more curved balls at him. So Dov, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I don't believe in coincidences. I think it's synchronicity. And it's a thrill and honor to be at the RSA. Thank you again, Joe. I want to acknowledge Matthew Taylor for his leadership and inviting me, and you, Mary Ryan, and the great team at the RSA. Beyond it being an honor for me to be here, I admire the RSA for many reasons, but chief among them is that since you founded and scaled a moral framework, from a coffee shop to over 27,000 fellows forming a great community of human progress and enlightenment, you have demonstrated that if this framework is the right framework, it will not only endure, it will be and remain relevant. And I admire the RSA for that. As you heard, I come to you from America. And speaking of frameworks, our political frameworks, to most observers, aren't holding up all that well these days, but I remain hopeful. And except for our espionage industry, that's working pretty well, right? And before I came to the airport, made a last-ditch effort to go onto Obamacare.gov, and I could not log in and get health care. I tried again, and then I decided that I better quit, or I would not be able to give this speech until December, and I mean December 2014. But we will figure that out. But at the core of Obamacare is something that I really respect, this idea of a marketplace. a marketplace where people are free to choose. And when I think of marketplaces, I think of one of your RSA members, Adam Smith, who also happens to be the founding father of capitalism. He spoke of marketplaces. And I think that he is somebody we need to reconnect with. And when I think of Adam Smith, what comes to mind is the following. Very few Americans, might be or might not be true of you, happen to know, and they are surprised when I tell them that Adam Smith was not an economist. He was the chairman of the moral philosophy department at Glasgow University. He believed that life and business and human endeavor was personal. He spoke of mutual sympathies. He believed that only if you scale a moral framework of personal values will capitalism endure and create the kind of human progress and enduring prosperity that we all seek. He actually never used the word capitalism. He spoke about a system of natural liberties. We disconnected from this fundamental idea. Instead of scaling upon the foundation of the father of modern capitalism, we replaced him with the godfather of capitalism. Anybody want to mention the most famous line from the movie? Anybody want to throw it out? Make me an offer I can't refuse. Leave the gun, take the cannoli, right? But I think the most famous line is it's not personal, it's just business. We have scaled two spheres. There's a personal life and a business life. And we do that in all of our endeavors. Now, if you can create a separate sphere that's just business, greed is good, too big to fail, just do it, I don't care how, my way or the highway, it's just about shareholder returns and everything else is some externality. These are rational strategies if, and only if, you can maintain and sustain a separate sphere. But if you can't, it is misguided to try to scale such a system. Now, when I say that we have disconnected from Adam Smith's fundamental idea of moral capitalism, I am not implying that we have scaled immorality. I am arguing that we have scaled morality in our personal lives. Even though we're imperfect, we keep trying, and we have scaled amorality. And amorality is more subtle, more pernicious, and therefore more toxic. It's good people over here doing just business over here. Scaling sustainable values that sustain human relationships over here, like truth, integrity, respect, and honesty, and scaling situational values, a rule and policy, or any which way I can do it in this situation or that. Nonetheless, most people believe that capitalism is the best system available, even though we are trying to come to grips with some other sense. We know that without private enterprise, without capitalism, we will not create an inclusive world of prosperity, progress. And at the same time, we know equally well, because we live through the boom and bust cycles and the crises and a world of have and have-nots, we see that something about capitalism is not working. So we are trying to make sense of it. And in the spirit of making sense of it, the most recent study done of the most popular online search on Webster's dictionary was capitalism. Literally, people going online to try to get a sense of the definition. What does it really mean? And to me, that illuminates and reveals that we are grappling, we embrace, because we're searching for it, and we are grappling with how to really do it at scale. There are two reasons to reconnect to the moral foundations of capitalism. One is a philosophical one, and it came from David Hume, who said that the moral imagination diminishes with distance. It was a deep insight about human nature, that if something is far from us, our moral imagination relative to it dissipates. But we now live in a world that's much smaller, where there is no distance. The ability to park our morality over there and be just something else or just business over here is hard to maintain. In addition to a philosophical reason to reconnect, I give you an urgent, contemporary, empirical reason. Today, for the first time in our lives, people can make history, record history, publicize and amplify history, and make a wave throughout the world around the history they are creating. In short order, our world has gone from connected to interconnected to interdependent. Interdependency is a moral reality. We are ethically and morally interdependent. Why? Because we rise and fall together. One vegetable vendor in Tunisia was able to spark a revolution towards freedom throughout the entire Middle East with a few friends and cell phone cameras. One banker in this town, a mid-level banker, I'm not speaking of the London whale, I'm speaking about somebody else, was able to lose at his desk with one click $2 billion, introduce extra volatility into our already volatile markets, and wipe out bonuses for all of his colleagues. We have never lived in a world where the behavior of any one person could affect so many others so far away and in ways it never could before. Interdependency is a moral relationship where we depend on each other. And the future will be that which allows us to either rise together or fall together. Now, this type of interdependency is rendering us vulnerable, even though there's an opportunity to lean into the world, figure out how it works, and turn these vulnerabilities into strengths. But let me give you the broader context. In 1995, when the internet just started to take off, there were 672 protests that year. This year, 2013, year to date, there are already over 300,000 protests. Every one of these brands has had a consumer protest so potent and compelling that they were forced to reverse course and fundamentally change a policy or practice. Many of you are familiar with Netflix. Netflix was riding so high back then, they still are today, and they are today because their CEO has owned the issue and said, we were once arrogant, and today we are scaling the human value of humility in how we do business. But when they were adding subscribers faster than they could count, they decided in that strength comes the opportunity to do a little price increase, and 800,000 of their subscribers in unison came together in a period of 48 hours, pointed in the same direction, and bolted on them. When is the last time you saw 800,000 people engage in collective action that quickly and that uniformly? I believe that all of this means that we are now deep in the era of behavior, because the only way to respond to an interdependent landscape is to forge healthy interdependencies. And the reasons we need to forge healthy interdependencies is that the era of interdependencies has created so much freedom from Mubarak, Morsi, Gaddafi, micromanaging bosses, screaming football coaches, corporate communications doing all the talking because anybody can go on Facebook and do some talking. We have never seen such unprecedented power to cast off hierarchy, structure, formal authority. A DVR, TiVo, allow us to bypass network commercials when they were able to keep us in our seats and make us watch those commercials. If we open our eyes to this, anything that was formal, autocratic, vertical, hierarchical, we can cast off. So again, the only way to respond to so much freedom from is to reconnect with what the Magna Carta was about, or the US Constitution, because while freedom from depends on freedom from authority, freedom to pursue happiness, to live a meaningful life, to collaborate, to build a great company, to study, to learn, has never been achieved since the beginning of time without moral frameworks, values, a certain kind of governance, and a certain kind of leadership. And right now we have so much freedom from that we are creating lots of fear and anxiety, but we can go on a journey to scale the possibility of freedom too. So I believe that we are in the era of behavior, and to me, behavior is every tweet, every post on Facebook, every email, every interaction, every customer experience. It's not just, oh, he was let out of prison early for good behavior, or telling a child to behave right after he misbehaves. It's not just about do the right thing. It's all the ways in this world, this magnificent world, where we relate to others, communicate, connect, and collaborate. I'm also saying that in the era of behavior, the source of competitive advantage has shifted to behavior. The ability to create value comes from relationships. Now, if we are in a new era, isn't it time to reconnect with Einstein, who said, whenever you're in a new era, you are required to rethink fundamentals, not to reform your system or tinker with it or reset it or reboot it, but to rethink fundamentals. I've traveled over 5,000 kilometers, and I want to offer you my one rethink. And my one rethink is one idea. Better yet, my one idea is just one word. The word is how. I'm going to offer a grammatical shift here that brings with it a deep philosophical pivot. You see, this word how has been used as an adverb or adjective. How's it going, buddy? How are you? How do I get from A to B? And we count with it. How much revenue? How much market share? How many friends? How many followers? How many click-throughs? It's an ornament. It's window dressing. It modifies the noun, the things we want. Those are the things we scale. To me, how is a noun. It's the how that makes the difference. That's a how company. They get their hows right. Because if how is a noun, it stands for a thing, an ethic of human endeavor, a lens through which we look at how we do what we do. And the minute we think that how is a thing, not just a question, but the answer, we can scale this thing, get good at it, go to work on it, and bring our innovative agenda to the how and not just to what we get done. So what behaviors create these interdependencies? The how behaviors. I also traveled here with a suitcase that had wheels on it, that has wheels on it. Many of you have wheels on your suitcases, probably every one of you. It's a simple shift in behavior. Do you know that it took 20 years to get people to wheel their suitcase when we used to carry them? You know why? Because men said only women would be caught dead in an airport wheeling their suitcases. Real men, macho men, carry their suitcases. A simple behavioral shift needed a shift in mind, the way Einstein called for. And as I think of all these shifts in behavior, from carrying to wheeling, or we put a product on sale, buy now, not later, more, not less, you watch a political attack ad, vote left or right, we have scaled the mechanics and mechanisms to shift behavior left, right, forward, back, more or less. And those behaviors are not the behaviors that can engender healthy interdependencies. Instead, we need a different kind of behavior. When I sit with executive teams and I say, tell me the behaviors you want. I want passion, I want loyalty, I want collaboration, humility, passion, loyalty, proactivity, integrity. And then there was a study of over 1,000 recruiters who looked at over 800 companies in 40 countries, and they were asked, what are your principal hiring criteria? These are the 10 that made the list. Each one voted on which ones would make up their top 5. Leadership, ability to deal with pressure, initiative, integrity, professionalism, motivation, adaptability, collaboration. You cannot shift for 8 out of these 10. You could double people's salary and say, you two get in the room and don't come out until you learn to collaborate, especially if you're from different cultures, and they'll never come out of that room. You go in there and don't come out until you have a brilliant idea. We are at a time where we can't shift for the behaviors because we are asking, whether you're hiring or in all walks of life, for elevated behaviors, the most human ways for human beings to manifest their humanity in how they treat others and manifest their special qualities. This is what elevated behavior looks like. In the University of Michigan health systems, their doctors were under crisis because they were being sued like others increasingly for medical malpractice. The doctor said, let's reconnect with our values. Every time we harm a patient, why don't we simply say, we are sorry? What do you think their lawyer said to them? Absolutely not. To say you're sorry is to admit vulnerability. We have more money than these. We can wait them out. We can fight them out. The doctor said, no, the right thing to do is to reconnect with patients after you harm them. And what better way behaviorally to reconnect than to say, you're sorry? They started to do that. And their lawsuits and payouts went down by 50%. Other hospitals started to do the same thing. And they had the same result. And now 37 United States of America have passed legislation that apologies cannot be held against you in the court of law, through how these doctors reconnected with their values and translated them into a behavior and apology They changed how they take care of patients. They created a culture within their institution that was more comfortable talking about mistakes, so they were able to repair other aspects of how they deliver health care. And they made a wave throughout society with better legislation that enabled their ability to be values-based, then fight with it. And if you go up to a doctor and say, listen, it turns out that if you start apologizing, you'll be sued less, and the doctor starts to apologize for that reason, he or she gets sued more because it was inauthentic. In this connected world where you could see into people, you have to mean it. You know, I think of 18th century Enlightenment, where this great institution started. And back then, we put man at the center of the universe. And when I think of Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart or the management guru Peter Drucker, one said there's a difference between doing that which you have a right to do and that which is right to do. There's a difference between doing things right and doing the right things, whether in business, in law, and society. What a distinction. The former is about putting man at the center of the universe and having rules and policies that let him or she or her do that which they can or cannot do. The 21st century Enlightenment, which Matthew Taylor speaks so eloquently about and writes about, is about putting behavior, elevated behavior, at the center of the universe, because it's about doing that which is right to do. Not what you can or can't do, but what you should or should not do. Companies are getting this. Chevron is the human energy company. Cisco is the human network. Dow is the human element. Deere is human flourishing. Samsung, designed for human. Ally Bank, we speak human. TD Bank, time to bake human again. One company after another realizes they're in this new era of enlightenment, and they are saying, let's connect. Let's relate in a new sphere, in a new dimension that transcends our product, our service, how we make money. Let's connect based on who we are and how we relate to you. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's one thing to proclaim your humanity, and it's another thing to manifest that humanity through corporate and organizational practices and individual and leadership behaviors. But marketing departments are rarely wrong. They are in touch with every twitch of the social nerve, and they know where the world is going, and the question is, are we going to follow them there? And right now, we have work to do, because even though we're proclaiming humanity, we know that humanity only happens at scale when people's heart is in the game. And right now in the United States of America, 7 out of 10 employees are not engaged on the job, and 2 out of those 7 are disengaged to the point that they are sabotaging their company. Sadly, we have a jobs crisis, too many people out of work. But to me, this is a careers crisis, people who have a job, not free to contribute their character and creativity and their best self. In the UK, the statistics are slightly even worse. 8 out of 10 people are disengaged. This is billions of dollars and pounds of lost productivity, and these are the people who could be creating jobs for their brothers and sisters and uncles and cousins. There's a global consumer crisis where 7 out of 10 consumers are not engaged with the brands they buy from, and the number one reason they cite is the lack of the elevated behavior of simply keeping your brand promise. So, where do we go from here? It's one thing to have values. It's another thing to proclaim your values. What we need to do is to scale values. Life is about scaling products and services and programs and initiatives and policies. What about scaling values? By translating them into behaviors. Now, every one of those elevated behaviors, think of them as an app or a killer app. Do you remember when Microsoft Word went head-to-head with WordPerfect? Every magazine talked about the battle of the killer app. And then Bill Gates said, I have an idea. I'm going to build Windows, an operating system. Because if I have an operating system, Word plus Excel plus PowerPoint and email can all work together. And he won. Think of every one of these behaviors, these human behaviors: collaboration, creativity, passion, innovation, all the things we want, doing the right thing, as killer apps. But we have an 18th century operating system of carrots and sticks applied against rules and policies that tries to extract performance and repetitive performance out of people when we need a human operating system to inspire it in them. We have deep, hard work ahead to start to rethink our institutions and create an operating system that guides and inspires and animates elevated behaviors. If you scale something, you need metrics. We've all heard the expression that you manage what you measure, and what you measure is what you get. If we rethink our metrics, we will start to see that all of our metrics are how much metrics. How much GDP, how much revenue, how much market share, how many friends, and how many followers. But if we step back, we ought to say, everything we choose to measure is our way of saying this matters. And when we choose to not measure something, we're saying it doesn't matter. So our metrics are a window into what we value and into our values. In an interdependent, horizontal, social, personal world, is it not time that we start to measure how things get done, how we were, how we treated others? Recently, we conducted the largest independent, not survey, but statistical analysis of over 2 million observations of actual behavior from 36,000 people working in 18 countries. And we looked at their behavior. And what we looked for is, are we getting the resiliency, the collaboration, the long-term thinking that we need, the trust-based behaviors, values, inspiration, and a pursuit of significance and not just conventional short-term success. We went to look what happens to institutions. What happens at institutions where these behaviors are found in a flourishing way? And you know what we discovered? Some amazing and encouraging news. If, and I say if, you can scale values into these kinds of behaviors, and they are found in abundance, you get so much less of what you don't want. So much less of what you don't want, misconduct, and so much more innovation, loyalty, and satisfied customers. What we saw is that organizations fell into largely 3 categories: very top-down, rigid, autocratic organizations, and then a very rules-based, carrots and sticks, structured, departmentalized, command and control-led organizations, and then we found those human organizations where these values were translated into those elevated behaviors. We also found that the adoption of new ideas, a good reputation, recommending your organization as an employer of choice, and financial performance were also yielded. Great news that by focusing on the how, you get more of the how much you want. Yet, only 3% of organizations made it into the human category. The others had some of these qualities, but they weren't fully there. But why should they? We're just at the beginning of an era. We have work to do to scale these values. The work to do to scale these values requires leadership. And if we rethink our leadership, we will acknowledge the following: nothing gets done in this world without power and authority. Leaders have to be in a position to generate energy and behavior in others. But we now live in a world where, while wealth and capital is still being concentrated, another type of power is being democratized, decaying, and becoming more diffuse. The ability to command, to capture. Formal authority: do this because I'm the boss. Do this because I filled out your performance evaluation and you're going to need to reckon with me. The ability to command is giving way. Power over people is giving way. And we're creating space to scale up moral authority. Nelson Mandela, and I pray for him, in his hospital bed, in his pinky, hitting one tweet, has more moral authority than so many people who are running massive organizations. We are now in a world where moral authority, let's do this because we share values, there's trust. The mission that I'm pursuing is as much yours as it is mine. This is the type of power and authority that we are seeing scaled up. It is therefore not an accident that if you go back 12 years to 6 years, and you look at how the United States Super Bowl was won, and it's about winning, it's about too big to fail because the biggest teams typically win in terms of how fast they run, how much they can lift, etc. Every single coach of the United States Super Bowl was a screaming, distant, dictatorial figure. Look at them. But if you go back the last 6 years, every one of them is more humanitarian and quiet, and they happen to be younger and up and coming with fewer bad habits to shed and more 21st century habits to embrace. This is a global phenomenon. This is the wrong place to remind you that Spain won the World Cup and the European Cup, but their coach is considered a human relations expert, Vicente Del Bosque. There is hardly a major championship won in sports, in any major sports, where the coach today is not a connector and a collaborator and a humble, deferential, trusting coach. Look at CEOs today, one after another saying, I am killing command and control. I'm trying to scale collaboration. I'm seeing a mega trend. It's time not to look at the headlines, but look at the trends as to where the world is going. And what these individuals understand is that there are only three ways, principally and essentially, to get another human being to do something. You can coerce them with a stick. You can motivate them with a carrot. And coercion and motivation are without us, and they happen to us. And if you have 8 carrots, then you're going to get 8 parts motivation. And I've never seen an employee share their bonus, their carrots, with somebody else. They're stimulants. And in a recession, they're fewer and harder to come by. The third, and ironically most enduring, free, renewable, clean, and sustainable form of human energy is inspiration, because the first 2 letters in inspiration, as a hint, are in. Inspiration doesn't happen to us, it happens in us. And what's in us? Our values. Our beliefs that we hold dear, missions worthy of our dedication, purposes that elevate us. Leadership today is going from formal to moral, over people to through them, all the way in them to inspire them. Coercion and motivation shift behavior. Inspiration elevates behavior. In the interdependent world, it is elevated behavior that we need to build the human operating system to fire up. How many of you are familiar with Martha Payne? Scottish girl, you've heard about her? This is when she was 9, she's 11 today. Martha Payne thought that the food at her school wasn't nutritious. She went to her dad and said, Dad, I'd like to take your camera and borrow it and start taking pictures of the food that's less than nutritious. And I'm going to blog about it. And she did. What do you think the school did? They went to the school board, and through command and control leadership, they shut her down. But then the famous chef Jamie Oliver and about 1 million people came online, blew wind in her sails. The school reversed its policy. It started to serve not only gourmet food, but healthy food. Many children around the world started to engage in the same conversation and inspire change in their schools. Then they raised money, and they had a little extra, and they donated it to malnutrition children in Malawi. If you go onto Martha Payne's blog, she says that I am the future workforce leader. Because leadership and leaders used to be either born or made, but in the interdependent world, leaders can be self-made. They can have the values and come out of nowhere, and a 9-year-old can change the conversation and force leaders to go from a one-way commanding conversation to a two-way conversation. As I conclude, I think it's fair to say that anytime you find yourself in a new era, in your personal lives, your business lives, your artistic lives, and your lives at home, and you're starting to rethink, it involves a journey, right? Anytime you rethink and you move forward, it's a journey, it's unknown, it's scary. In our personal lives, we journey. Are your personal lives journeys, right? Why are our personal lives journeys? Our friendships, our marriages, how we learn, our health. Because the fundamental hallmark characteristic of a journey is that journeys are curvilinear. They go up and down. They zig and zag. But in business, this other sphere, if you go to your boss and say, boss, I have a plan. We're going to make a lot of progress, but in our plan, we are going to go up and down, you get fired. Because in this world, through control and analytics and budgeting and planning, we try to superimpose linear trajectories on a curvilinear world that no longer has a boom and bust cycle every 10 years, but every 10 weeks, and in some periods every 10 days. As the world fuses and becomes one, we need to embrace the ethic and framework of journeying and not just executing and implementing 5-point or 3-point or 7-point plans. The ethic of journeying inspires in us the ethic of being resilient and propulsive at the same time. We stay loyal and committed, but we move forward. Journeys are not just about bottom line and the destination. Journeys not only go up and down, journeys are about progress. And journeys are also paradoxical. We learn that if you pursue happiness, Aristotle taught us it will elude you. But if you pursue significance, making a real difference in someone's life, happiness can find you. Same is true in business or any walk of life. Let's pursue significance and give space to find us. Just like when we pursue happiness, it eludes us. But when we do that which is meaningful to us and matters and is significant, it finds us. As I end, To be on a journey requires the most elevated way of being that we've ever known. In the just business world, many managers say, show me a plan. Hope is not a strategy. But when people don't have hope, they despair. That's when they disengage. The great people of this country, through your courage and resilience right around World War II, inspired us in America and FDR to say to the American people, you have nothing to fear but fear itself, which is an elegant, double negative way of saying, don't lose hope. Right when people are leaning out, that's when we need to lean in. So I say, while hope is technically not a strategy, without hope there is no strategy. And in a world in which we need to journey, without hope, you're not on a journey. So I leave you with this thought. I don't have a 5-point plan. I brought with you just one idea, one word. And if you find any value or merit in this word, how, then do 2 things. Connect with Confucius, who said journeys are about taking the first step, the rest will take care of itself. Lean into this world. Get your house right. You will engender and create such a virtuous upward spiral of hope as your example inspires others to get their house right. And I think we will create a world not just so full of hope, but a world where people are inspired by hope to see possibility and make those possibilities a great reality. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions that came up from the talk, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So you're not a motivational speaker, you're a CEO. So I see all that, and the cynic in me says, well, Dov, that's great words, but you're a CEO of a big company, you're operating, across the world. Yeah. How are you doing that yourself? How are you driving this into your own business?
That's a great question. There's 250 of us all over the world. In Paris, right here in the United Kingdom, we have an office with a great team of colleagues. We're all over the United States. We're in Mumbai, India. We see our company as a laboratory. I live in a great country, the United States. And as I sit here, there are some politicians who are not doing the right thing. There are some innocent people going to jail. Government is on the brink of shutdown, and yet I say we're a great country, because we're still on a journey to perfect our union. I can tell you this, every one of my dear LRN colleagues knows that we're on a journey. And we experiment. We try different things. We even have elections in the company. The way we do performance evaluations is every colleague, for example, picks a mentor to have a meaningful conversation around their performance, but they picked their mentor. We didn't give them a boss. We have a pretty rigorous set of criteria, and they pick about 20 colleagues who give them feedback on their performance, written, and it could be oral. They take that all in, and then we extend trust to them to internalize that and give themselves a self-rating. And their bonus is partially determined on their self-rating, as long as they publish it for all their colleagues to see. You see, we keep thinking that innovation is the iPhone, the thing that we create. But why not innovate in how we run a company? How we hire for character, not just talent and skill. How we do performance evaluations. I think the 21st century is going to see innovation in how we govern people, how we lead. And what we're really trying to do, and we are far from perfect, and our journey is frustrating some days and imperfect other days, and some days we're at our great day and it's clear to us that we're being our best, and some days we're being immature. But I think there's strength in not giving us a final grade every day, being on the journey. And what's interesting is we're having quite a dialectic with our clients, because they say, how do you do it? And we say, how do you do it? And we are sharing best practices in the how and not just in the what. Okay.
We live a dualistic nature. So I see all the things you talk about of what's connecting us more, and you talk fusing into one world. And I also didn't see you at all mention the fact that I see also the fact that people are feeling more disconnected than they've ever been, and actually technology, while it has a potential to drive change and drive people together and allow democratization of power, it also is increasingly, I see, disconnecting people and actually making people fearful and actually overloaded, and actually they're hiding away from life. So you didn't mention that at all. So I'm interested, because as a philosopher, you can see that dualistic nature we have. How do you think about that?
So as I said, journeys are curvilinear and they're paradoxical. I think that we're in the bottom part of the journey right now, that we've gone forward into this world, but we're in a trough. We're in the deep, dark valley of confusion, and it's not coming together. Let's talk about duality. Right now, most online platforms are promising connectivity. The other day, last year, 4 of my colleagues in India put a picture on our online platform Chatter, a picture of themselves on bicycles about to head out into a bike race in India to raise money for girls, for young women in India. And I felt that technology connected me to them. And I felt like I'm on the race with them. But what if I went and I said, have a great race, and while you're at it, I hope you had a good steak to fortify yourself. I would have insulted them because they don't eat steak and I do. A cow is a sacred being. There's nothing in the software that connects us that gives us the answer and inspires the elevated behavior. Now, we are never going to be less connected and therefore less vulnerable. Through technology, we are going to see into boardrooms and factory floors and into the character and intentional spheres of people's lives. But we've got to do the hard work of not just assuming that just because we are connected, that we have the human frameworks to be connected in healthy as opposed to unhealthy ways. Speaking of duality, Narcissus taught us, or the myth of Narcissus taught us the following. I'm a father. I want my children to love themselves. Some healthy narcissism is necessary to feel that you matter, that your endeavors matter. Narcissus did not love himself. He looked into the lake and fell in love with his image. Over 50% of girls, I believe, on Facebook are photoshopping their pictures. So many of us are using, no one wakes up in the morning and says, boy, do I look ugly. Let me post that picture. So we're in a period right now that we're so connected, but we are actually curating the social being and the real being. But we're going to figure that out, and it doesn't work. And I think we're going to come down to fusing and finding a way to fuse our reality. But I agree, we're in a period right now where technology is not the answer, but it connects us.
Okay. And just finally, again, companies might see this and say, well, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
You know, that looks great. But the reality of the engine room is it's short-term, it's profits-driven, people under pressure, that management structures are very difficult to change, especially in middle management, that people still want to buy on price and quality. They think that's the answer, that actually the way, you know, that business aren't designed at the moment to create this. So how do you actually go about, so if I say, yeah, I get that in principle, but actually I run a multinational company, I've got 100,000 employees, you know, come on, give me a break. What would you say to them? How do you actually drive that into being a reality?
The beautiful thing about business is the best device and mechanism to do something at scale. Because businesses know and organizations know how to systematize. ERP, HRIS, TQM, CRM, CSR. There's an acronym for every aspect of business that they've become rigorous about and disciplined and systematized. I think the next frontier is to get more harmonious and synchronized around the forces that bear upon behavior. Bosses know that they could be so progressive and walk up to someone and say, I trust you to innovate, and the person runs off to innovate, and then they got to get 2 signatures to spend $10 to innovate. The left hand just took away what the right hand giveth. If you love your company, go on Facebook and defend us when we're attacked. And then the social media policies, don't you dare write something down. The system today is not working, and it's hitting its limitations, and they know that. And they also know that this is deep work, and you can't just have 4 initiatives and 4 programs and give them each to an executive sponsor and say, in a year, the culture will be more human. The other thing is, most consumer brands that are doing global business said, we're going to have a good year in Turkey this year in Brazil. And then in Brazil, they raise bus fares and there's a protest, and I'm sure the Brazilian business plan was shot for that year, and in Turkey. The dirty little secret is that big companies are having a tough time hitting their quarterly numbers. So they're actually getting, if we can't hit our quarterly numbers, why don't we start going on a journey to do this for the long term? Paul Polman, the CEO of Unilever, when he became the CEO, did go to Wall Street. It was an act, I believe, of moral authority, and say no more quarterly guidance. When Google went public, they said no more quarterly guidance. But think of the message it sends to their own employees to say, here is the context in which you could think long term. It wasn't just between them and Wall Street. They were signaling to their own people it's okay to think long term. It's starting to happen.
Okay. Let's take some questions. So I think we've got there's a lady here, I think we've got yes, if you can just give us your name and where you're from, and then...
My Is this working? Yes.
Yep.
My name's Helen Hopper. I'm a philosopher, actually, originally by academic background, and now leadership consultant at Bessie Hopper McVeigh. I'm really interested in why you focused on behaviour, actually, because I think behaviour is really important, but it's also quite contingent. So if I don't know, insulted your tie, which I wouldn't do, by the way. If I'm your friend, we're having a joke, and if I'm more powerful than you, it might be oppressive and all those sorts of things. So I'm interested in why you focused on behaviour, perhaps rather than other things you've mentioned, like character, because ultimately some of this is brought to life by moral judgments and the right people in the right places. So, character or relationships, which is also what sort of brings behaviour to life. We've spent, I guess, in my business 15, 25 years doing behavioural frameworks for businesses, and they're very common in all sorts of large global businesses, but many of them don't have impact, and the value systems, they don't have impact. So related to your question, how do you bring it to life? Is it about behaviour? And if it's not, what might it be that would really light the spark?
Great, thank you very much.
Great question. The philosopher, since you're a philosopher, let me mention one, Heraclitus, the ancient philosopher Heraclitus said, character is your fate. I believe in the interdependent world, it's never been more true that we will go as far as our character will take us. Organizations didn't used to have character. Individuals did. Malice, aforethought, depravity of heart, negligent homicide. We knew individuals act from character. That's why we are in the business of character development as parents, as teachers, as employers and leaders. We said businesses don't have character, it's just business. This business has a helpline in case an employee sees some wrongdoing. But what if there's not enough trust in the culture and people won't pick up the phone even though they know the number? I believe the interdependent world now allows us to impute a character to an organization, how it does what it does. Now, if you take the word how and who, our character, who and how are the same letters. Without character, how makes no sense. And without purpose, the why, how also makes no sense. The what is the only four-letter word, the commodity in this whole thing. So I think it all starts with character. The issue is at scale. You can't pay an employee for their integrity or honesty. You can only pay for the behavior that someone with integrity manifests. And if we keep the structure the way it was in the past and leave it alone and start to introduce the moral vernacular of integrity and honesty and character into the system, we're going to create confusion unless we translate these moral values into observable, rewardable, celebratable behaviors and disciplinable behaviors. So you've got to take it to behavior. Now, you mentioned relationships. What do we do in relationships? We treat each other certain ways. We communicate with each other. To me, that's all behavior. And we either are in sustainable relationships because what we share are sustainable values, the human values, the trust, the transparency, the honesty, and integrity, or we're treating people instrumentally, situationally. I'm going to get from this person what I can, and if I never see them again, I'll take even more from them. So I do think it's about behavior and relationships, and it all comes from character and values.
Okay, can we just have, because I just want to bring the microphone back to you, because I just want to ask you, what you've been doing this a long time, what have you found that works?
Thank you. I think it's about character and values, and in organisations, they come from, I think, two things. One is heritage, actually what an organisation believes it's there for, what it's been about, and what its heritage is, and the people right at the top. Actually, I have this theory, so part of what we do is based in occupational psychology, and this doesn't come from there at all, quite heretical, but there are people that are being human and people that are doing human. And so the doing humans are sort of doing human-type behaviours, but they don't have the values as the character's not there, the wrong purpose or a lesser purpose. So I think if you get the right people at the top that sincerely have those values, they just go right down through an organisation.
Yeah, and Dov, would you agree with that? Because, I mean, in my experience, is if you haven't got the leader who's passionate, who is courageous, who's had their own personal epiphany, they've seen behind the veil of this sort of mistake we've made about what business is for, that actually if you don't have that, then actually you're on a hiding to nothing. I mean, do you agree with that?
If it's a necessary condition. If you don't have it at the top, it's time to look elsewhere. But I see leaders on the top roll up their sleeve in every other part of the company, and they get in there. Strategy, they travel, they look at markets and territories and products and design. And when it comes to behavior, they go, I set the right example, I set the right tone. Nobody is strong enough to just send an electrical current through the company and say, that's all I need to do. Here I roll up my sleeves, here I just walk the talk. Because when they set the tone, middle management gets it, and they could go left with it, right with it, or do nothing, or do what they want to do. Leaders have to roll up their sleeves in the behavioral sphere and do the hard work of not just setting the tone, but really taking a systems view of what are we celebrating, what are we punishing, who are we hiring, what are we rewarding, what are we measuring, and you've got to do more work than just set the tone. And this tone at the top stuff is just not enough.
And Dov, is there something around millennials and age? So because I also get a bit fed up listening to it's all leave it to the millennials. They're different. They'll get it right. Is there an age thing? Is it the younger CEOs coming through that are fundamentally different?
Well, look, it's not an accident that the football coaches, 5 out of the 6 that won that last Super Bowls, were under 40 when they did that. Give this 10 years. The people in power today grew up with command and control as calcified deep habits. 10 years from now, the people in the positions of power will have not had to transform and give up command and control. They will have learned a new way to do it. You're going to see, in my view, more gender equality. You're going to see different types of leaders come up. Martha Payne, as I said that she's a future workplace worker, and that's why I'm optimistic. Just give this some time.
Okay. Another question from the front. Again, if you could just say your name and where you're from.
So I'm Jonathan Schiffers. I work at the RSA, but this is a question from one of our followers on Twitter who's not in the room with us.
God, how modern we're becoming.
Michael Cillian. Okay, so the question is there a risk that we can get a backlash from the era of behaviour, for example, in coping with catastrophes? So what would the kind of the implications of what you've laid out mean if the world had to face a catastrophe, or if a particular society faced a catastrophe?
And that's a great question, because again, when things get really tough, there's a choice, isn't there? Either everyone comes together, but actually we have lots of examples currently of when it gets tough, it all breaks apart.
Listen, I can't predict the future. I feel the following. In the interdependent world, we are either going to fall together or rise together. We really are more bound up together. And we just need to lean into this world and forge healthy interdependencies by creating more coalitions and alliances that share values. And that's the only way to do it. Putting an aircraft carrier outside someone's shore does not make terrorists behave any differently, and they cause catastrophes. The ability to control for things and command things and capture things and quarantine things is just starting to go away in this very horizontal world. So I think we have no choice but to forge healthy interdependencies. And it's not complicated, because interdependencies always come down to behavior.
Okay, great. We've got a question for the gentleman just behind.
Can I tell you can I give you one example of a
Sure.
real catastrophe that I think brings us home? As an American, recently, we retired the Endeavour. It no longer flies to space. It was very painful to watch us retire, because for us, the space program is a national trophy. It was associated with technological and scientific renaissance. In 1986, when the Challenger blew up, we were mortified. It happened on the global stage. It was horrific. And we went into NASA through the lens of controls and checks and balances and processes and governance and compliance and risk management. And you know what we found? NASA was deficient. So we made NASA a perfect organization, billions of dollars, the best people, every process imaginable to avoid the next catastrophe, to use the word in the question. And then in 2003, the Columbia blew up. And we said, how could this happen again? So we went into NASA and we said, there must be a deficiency that we didn't catch last time. And you know what we found? They were a perfect organization. Every control, every process, every manual, every checks and balance, it was all there. So we looked deeper. And you know what we found? There was too much arrogance and too much fear and not enough trust. Junior people said, if I came forward and said that this little sponge, if it breaks away from the wing, it can bring down the mothership. And I was too scared to do it, because big people don't always listen to little people, and there's not enough trust. The human infrastructure, the humanity of the organization, had more to do in determining whether we would keep flying or not than anything else that was designed to avoid catastrophe as a conventional control.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Adam Scott, fellow. You've touched on politics.
Yeah.
Let's bring it down to a local level for each of us as voters. In my constituency, the Member of Parliament is about to retire. The shortlisting of the likely successor, it's a solid Labour constituency, is taking place in the next 10 days. And then there's the final selection, and then, of course, in due course, the general election. What would you say to us who are in the grassroots of democracy about our choice of candidates for your election next year and our election in 2015 that might improve the nature of our two representative democracies?
Okay, great, thank you.
Great question. I talked about the personal sphere and the business sphere. There's another sphere, not just business. In DC, it's just politics. And we keep having food fights there. We're not even being as civil. Just politics has become a game. It's about headlines and polls. I mentioned going to the moon. I can't remember the last time a United States president, I think George Bush, the second George Bush, on some energy policies, but when JFK said we're going to go to the moon, that was an impressive vision. But you know what was even more impressive and audacious about it? He said within a decade. The problems we face today, almost each one of them, will take us a decade or more to fix. And the only politicians that we should support are the ones that are trusting us with the truth of our reality and saying, this will take 5 years, 10 years, or before. And it's the politician that's willing to enlist me in a journey that goes beyond their term, is the one that is doing something that is going to already capture my imagination. And then we as citizens have to do something else, because the days where we pay taxes as though we're customers and they provide us services because their government has to come to an end, we need to start to get into a two-way dialogue as active citizens with our leaders. And I think leaders have to start to engage in two-way dialogue, and we need to demand and then contribute to those. But it's the ones who trust us with the truth that connect.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions. Gentleman over here, and then a gentleman behind afterwards. We haven't got very long, so let's keep the questions quite brief.
Hello, I'm Javier Bacher. I'm the founding CEO of the Talent Foundation and a fellow of the RSA. I've been working in the world of behaviors for now many years, 25 years. I'm a doctor in psychology. And I thought the new era was not going to be an era of behavior, but actually an era of beliefs, because behaviors are outputs. Yeah. We don't do behavior. Behavior happens when we believe in certain things. And I've been trying to teach my young children some new behaviors, and it doesn't work really. And I feel sometimes I'm doing the equivalent of businesses. We're listing all the top 10 behaviors, like, you know, we share our toys. They don't do share their toys. But it's about, I think that we're lacking some tools around sharing and educating beliefs. Because if I believe in you, I trust you. Yeah. I cannot trust you unless I first believe in you. So, in a way, I don't know, I'm wondering how you're seeing this kind of panning out. And how do you
I think I need to clarify. I believe we're in the era of behavior, but not shifting behaviors that you can use carrots and sticks. We're in the era of elevated behavior. Elevated behavior is values-based behavior, belief-based behavior. So to scale those behaviors, we need to scale values. It's funny, you mentioned children. I'll tell you a story that I think goes to character. The other day I was driving to work, and it was about a year ago. My son just turned 6. He had just turned 5. And evidently, according to him, I forgot to say goodbye to him. So my phone rings, and my boy Lev gets on the phone, and he says, and I thought he was going to be really emotional and mad at me, emotive. Daddy, I'm mad at you. You didn't call me. You know what he says to me? What kind of father does not kiss his son? And Martha Payne is 9. He was 5. Even children are starting to look at things through the character lens, and they're starting to look at behavior. But back to your question, I really believe that beliefs and values, without them, we're not going to get elevated behavior. And that's what I mean by the era of behavior. It pulls it all in.
Okay, sir.
My name is Bill Dinning. I help to run a pension fund. When I was listening to you, it sounded like a very plausible sort of critique of Anglo-American capitalism.
Yeah.
But if you'd have been standing there giving that speech with a German accent or a Japanese accent, would you just have been saying, do it our way?
Say do what?
Would you be saying, just do it our way? Particularly somewhere like Japan. Do you see anywhere in the world that is doing or is closer to what you think they should be doing than we or you in America obviously are?
Yeah. So I tend to be frank. I don't tend to look at things through just national borders. Most leaders today are running global institutions. most global American CEOs, more than half their revenue and half of their employees are outside the United States. I tend to look at this in transcendent ways beyond borders, and I think that government and national identities are the last to give way. But I'm in the business of organizational human endeavor, and the more global it gets, with organizations that are doing business in 100 countries, with employees from different cultures who are trying to inspire all the diversity. So I think that this is really about shared, more universal human values. Do I think that Germany, given its particular history of what happened back then, is more acutely aware of interdependence and that their future depends on not having neighbors that are really failing? You know, I think that certain countries, I think, like Germany, I give them credit for this, and certain businesses realize that they cannot succeed in a failing world. That business is not separate from society. Business is in society. Their employees are consumers. Their employees are parents. Their employees are citizens. And I think that if you think that business and society has fused, then you can't do business separate from society, or you can't run a country as though the borders are not porous. You could keep trying. Yeah. I just think long term, I see it coming together.
Okay, we're running out of time, so last question from, if you can just say again who you are, where you're from.
Thank you. My name is Chris Large. I work for an environmental sustainable living charity called Global Action Plan. We spend a lot of time working with employees. Your statistic of 70–80% being disengaged at work is not at all a surprise. But what is a surprise to me when I am around organisations is that their directors and managers quite often don't recognise that their own employees are massively unengaged in their work. How do you go about trying to get that realisation across to people without getting kicked out of the door as a consultant?
Yeah, and Dov, it comes back to that thing, isn't it, is that you can't force people to have beliefs. You can't force them to have that, you know, how do you, when so many people are disengaged, even at the top, what can you do in that situation?
So first of all, our independent research showed three things. The number one most important capacity that you need in an organization to have engagement is high trust. Sometimes we don't realize that just speaking in a meeting is a great risk, because when you speak in a meeting, your boss might think that you're not that smart. And in low trust environments, people are disengaged. It's more rational to shut up. So trust is the number one thing. And we've learned to inspect for trust and verify. We don't let you spend money without signatures. And Aristotle taught us that the virtue of trust lies in giving it away, because when you give trust away, you're giving somebody else the power to do right by you or let you down. So we need to start scaling the true virtue of trust, which lies in giving it away. And it actually turns out that trust is a drug, a neuromodulator. Oxytocin is released in your mind, in your brain, when you receive trust and you reciprocate it. The second most important thing is a values-based organization where people are being principled and fair. And the third is that there is a mission larger than just shareholder returns, etc. When those three things are there, people engage. I want to say this on the record about engagement. If you say to somebody, does your boss take you to lunch, which is one of the things we score. If he screams at you at lunch, I hope he never takes you to lunch. And if it's a great lunch, I hope it's every day. Measuring these proxies, does your boss take you to lunch? Do you plan to be at your company in 12 months? Or what if you're going to be there because you have it too good and no one supervises you and you don't need to work hard? Would you recommend a friend to work? Well, I'm going to recommend my friends who can't get jobs. We've got to go beyond these superficial proxies of whether people are engaged. And if we start inspiring them with missions worthy of them, the engagement scores will go up as a byproduct of a deeper, more human connection.
And just finally, just to, when we first met, we started off talking about spirituality.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering about how deep we go in terms of understanding where our values come from. Because isn't that one of the problems, that actually, when I speak to all the business leaders who I think are sort of leading in this debate on sustainability, when you actually speak to them on a personal level, they have very, very strong spiritual values. And you know, I do some work with a Zen master called Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah.
He was just invited to Google, 20 technology companies. He was invited by the World Bank president to go and give a whole day of mindfulness training with all the senior management. Do you see that actually, because business doesn't like to talk about spirituality, don't talk about that, talk about values and behaviors, but is there something at a deeper level we need to be bringing back into the debate?
Well, I think that to go on an outward journey in the world, the most important journey is an inward one. We tend to do fiscal audits and not moral audits. Who are we? What do we stand for? When you have a big crisis, it's the easiest time to do a moral audit. You know, why did this happen? Who are we? Et cetera. But if we really want to do this in an affirmative, progressive way, the looking in the mirror and going on an inward journey. What do I really stand for? Why do I stand for what I stand for? What gives meaning to my life? I think that we're in an era, especially with the millennials, that more of them are going to read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's a journey for meaning, and it starts by an inward journey. I think you can come to values spiritually, from faith, through a more secular, humanistic ethic. But each person needs to take a moral account of why they're connected to values and what matters to them deeply, and then find ways to manifest that in the world that are unique to them and that bring their creativity to life. And that's where the diversity of the human experience will flourish. But I think it starts with an inward journey that then becomes an outward journey.
Great. So, Dov, I just want to say thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who came. Thank you for your online audience for joining us. As I said at the start, you know, this will be up on the website in the next few days. But just if we can also say thank Dov and really appreciate your time. Thank you.